In the highly disputed South China Sea, China has made a significant leap toward advancing its energy and military capabilities. Innovative floating nuclear reactors now power their man-made islands, supplying electricity, fresh water, and the energy required for military operations. These reactors represent a new era in strategic dominance, turning remote outposts into lethal hubs of strategic control. These unsinkable nuclear aircraft carriers, as they've been nicknamed, allow China's artificial islands to house airstrips, radar facilities, and missile sites with the assurance of unlimited energy. The floating nuclear reactors represent another technological leap and a new frontier in the geopolitical sphere, where energy, politics, and military might converge in the Pacific. Conflicts involving China, the United States, and their allies in the South China Sea have escalated dramatically. For almost a decade, the area has been fraught with military and political strife due to China's extensive territorial claims. However, a recent collision has intensified the situation to a critical point. In early June 2024, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel collided with the Philippine supply ship near the disputed Spratly Islands. China asserted that the supply ship had encroached upon the Second Thomas Shoal, a submerged reef that China claims as part of its territory. Just days before, Chinese forces had forcibly seized food supplies intended for Filipino naval personnel stationed on an outpost at the shoal. Adding to the provocation, Chinese vessels fired water cannons at 2 Philippine patrol boats, injuring crew members and damaging the vessels. Beyond these aggressive actions against the Philippines, China has also intensified efforts to provoke Taiwan, repeatedly launching naval drills that encircle the island as part of its broader ambition to seize control through military force. Several countries, including China, Vietnam, Taiwan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, assert territorial claims in the South China Sea. However, China's tactics have been notably aggressive and confrontational. In 2009, China declared ownership of more than 90% of the South China Sea, a claim it maintains despite a United Nations arbitral tribunal ruling it unjustifiable and unreasonable. China's response to opposition from its neighbors and international bodies has been to assert military strength and pursue rapid territorial expansion. This aggressive policy includes the construction of artificial islands in the South China Sea, a blatant violation of international law aimed at extending its territorial waters. These man-made islands challenge the sovereignty of neighboring nations and underscore the growing threat China poses in its quest for dominance in the region. China commenced its aggressive construction of artificial islands in 2013. While on its quest to build these sophisticated and self-sufficient military bases, equipped with air bases, ports, radar stations, and missile sites scattered across the South China Sea, the government destroyed ecologically delicate reefs. In other words, all these artificial islands China has been building in the past decade have become what World War II hero General Douglas MacArthur described as unsinkable aircraft carriers when referring to the Pacific Islands under Imperial Japanese Army control during the war. Besides its military use, the islands also serve a diplomatic and political purpose, at least according to the Chinese. They justify Beijing's claims on waters rich with minerals and fish, driving the government closer to its objective of dominating the South China Sea. The ambitious and cunning project, which began in 2014, involved using giant dredgers to scoop up sand from the seabed to expand existing islands and create new artificial ones. The project is now nearing completion. The Economist, which in the past has described the Chinese practice as a form of bullying in the South China Sea, has stated, quote, "If the terraforming no longer makes headlines, it is because it's largely complete." With these artificial islands, China has been conducting aggressive naval and air maneuvers close to Taiwan, the Philippines, and other key American allies in the region, provoking them. According to Gregory Poling, a South China Sea specialist affiliated with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the recent surge in incidents violating exclusive economic zones is a deliberate strategy by the Chinese government. To further escalate the situation in the region, China recently gave the green light to build a fleet of floating nuclear reactors to make its artificial islands even more powerful and lethal in the case of conflict against its neighbors. The research and development of these nuclear reactors took almost a decade to complete and is nearing its end. While China has expressed to the international community that it intends to employ them commercially, the United States and its regional partners know otherwise. If successful, the already threatening artificial islands will become unsinkable nuclear aircraft carriers that could be used at a moment's notice to launch military operations in the South China Sea with unlimited firepower. Admiral John Aquilino, the leader of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, has warned about the potential negative impact of China's use of floating nuclear power plants on the region. He stressed that this strategy could bolster China's claims in the highly contested maritime area. Also known as mobile power banks, they are small nuclear plants specifically tailored to be housed on ships. They provide power to stationary facilities, such as artificial islands and other vessels, including warships. Before the program's suspension began in 2016, China announced it would deploy over 20 mobile nuclear reactors to the South China Sea. Based on data gathered by Popular Science, the floating reactors are expected to operate at 25% capacity of one Chinese ground nuclear power station. Philippines National Security Council Assistant Director General Jonathan Malaya told the press, quote, "Anything that supports their military presence in those islands is technically a threat to our national security and against our interests." Dr. Michael Block, head of the Nuclear Research Group at Imperial College London, stated that despite China's nuclear upgrades, which will genuinely enhance the effectiveness of its artificial islands equipped with aircraft and missile systems, this is not the first time mobile nuclear reactors have seen the light. He noted that, quote, "There's a long history of marine nuclear reactors, mostly in submarines, but also in aircraft carriers and other ships. However, only the Russians have put one on a barge before." Akademik Lomonosov is a nuclear power plant mounted on a barge, the world's first floating nuclear power station, operating in the Arctic Sea since 2019, becoming the primary power source for the northern port city of Pevek that once relied on coal-fired power and an old nuclear power plant. The plant is 144 meters long and 30 meters wide, displacing 21,500 tons. It houses two KLT-40S nuclear reactors, modified versions of those used in Russian nuclear icebreakers. Each reactor produces up to 35 megawatts of electricity, giving the plant a combined output of 70 megawatts. It can also provide up to 300 megawatts of thermal energy for district heating. This capacity is sufficient to power a city with a population of around 100,000. China is currently working on two innovative prototypes, the ACPR-50S, which produces 60 megawatts, and the ACP-100S, which generates 125 megawatts. Each of these reactors is mounted on its 121-meter-long barge, allowing them to be towed wherever needed. These are pressurized water reactors with a passive cooling system, a modern design feature that prevents catastrophic meltdowns even if the cooling fails. In these pressurized water reactors, as the temperature increases, the power output decreases. This clever design helps prevent the reactor from overheating uncontrollably. The passive cooling system is another layer of safety. It kicks in to remove heat from the reactor core even if the power goes out, significantly reducing the chances of a severe accident. Such power directly threatens the United States and other nations in the region. An endless energy source on a small artificial island can give the Chinese military total dominance, thanks to its ability to maintain airstrips, radar facilities, and more importantly, missile sites for offensive and defensive measures. A floating reactor allows the Chinese to conduct prolonged military operations and poses more risks than U.S. Navy nuclear submarine visits to Allied ports in the Pacific. Furthermore, a nuclear plant in the Pacific also serves as a shield due to the risk of radioactive contamination, taking a heavy toll on the attacker if the atomic facility or reactor is targeted. This benefits the defender, allowing him to surround the nuclear reactor with defensive military assets like anti-air and anti-ship missile batteries, knowing the attacker would not harm them due to the possibility of unleashing lethal radioactive wastes. Besides solidifying China's territorial claims over the South China Sea and bolstering the military capacity of its artificial islands, the country's research in floating nuclear reactors will also help advance its aircraft carrier program. The latest intelligence reveals that China intends to have 6 aircraft carriers by 2035. Another benefit of floating nuclear reactors is disaster relief, as they can provide temporary power for a city. They can also be employed for oil exploitation. A nuclear power plant can provide clean energy and heat to remote areas, helping to decarbonize offshore oil, mining, and gas operations. These plants leave behind a small footprint and do not require constant refueling. Besides generating electricity, floating nuclear reactors also produce excess heat, which can be harnessed to operate desalination plants, ensuring a steady supply of fresh water. This is particularly beneficial for island bases that otherwise rely on water transported by diesel-powered systems. While China has explored renewable energy options like solar and wave power, these can only partially meet the energy needs of island bases. In contrast, nuclear power can fully sustain a base and support energy-intensive systems. Additionally, floating reactors could power future high-energy weapons, which are expected to become important in the next decade.